I think that we've got enough awfulness in the world. Every time you pick up a newspaper, it's someone's being murdered or dragged behind a bush somewhere. And I think it's about time we use our imagination and live some of our dreams instead, even if it's just for a little while of, escapism.
We're talking about the man, the myth, the Dragon Slayer himself, Ronnie James Dio, and his solo band, Dio. One of my favorite metal bands of all time, easily. And there could be no Dio band without the man himself, Ronnie James Dio. A man that kind of had short stature, but you know what? That's kind of what made him so much more empowering, is that there was this guy that, people would pick on for being short, but he was up there belting out the biggest notes you could possibly hear. Now, Dio was kind of getting a start in the 70s, 60s with his own projects. Got into a band known as Elf, ended up being picked up by the infamous Deep Purple guitar player Ritchie Blackmore for his project Rainbow, which will be an episode for another day. And then he had problems with Ritchie Blackmore, was kind of the way he would run the band, and was picked up by Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath. Him and Ronnie hit it off, and they eventually decided to kick out Ozzy from Black Sabbath, and infamously brought in Dio for the Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules albums. Very killer stuff as well. The drummer at the time, Vinny Appice, and Ronnie James Dio were really good friends, but they just kind of weren't getting along with the guitar player Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, or the bass player Geezer Butler. They were starting to butt heads a little bit. And it all fell apart when they were mixing a live album known as Live Evil.
We went to the studio the first 2 days, and Tony and Geezer never turned up. 2 days after that, I got a call from Geezer, and he said, we don't think this is really working out, so Tony's going to produce the album. I went, okay. They were told that Vinny and I had gone in on those 2 days and raised up the vocals in the mix and taken the guitar down. We hadn't started mixing yet, so I don't see where any of that came in. But that was the excuse for things that happened at that point. Too many drugs going down, too many people whispering in their ears, you don't need this, you don't need him, blah, 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 blah.
So Ronnie and Vinny took a gamble to leave Black Sabbath and form their own band. Now, oddly enough, Vinny was asked to stay in Black Sabbath and declined because he thought it'd be more interesting to see where Ronnie would go with his music, as well as he claims he was invited early on in the 80s, before even joining Black Sabbath, to join Ozzy Osbourne. He took a gamble with Ronnie, and I love Vinny Appice, an amazing drummer. He's the brother of Carmine Appice, which, yes, they're brothers, but their last names they pronounce different to kind of separate themselves from each other or whatever the hell. I love the way this guy plays. He's very heavy-handed, and he does tons of awesome fills. I love his snare fills, everything. He, to me, is the Dio drummer and the Dio Black Sabbath drummer. So they went on to make their own band. They were kind of trying out some people. Things weren't working well. They brought in Jakey Lee, who would join Ozzy as a guitar player for a little bit. That didn't really work out. And Dio just always had a longing for British guitar players. He just had to have a British player for some reason. So they went over to England, kind of scrounging around for a guitar player, where they met up with the Rainbow bassist, Jimmy Bain, who was really good friends with Dio. And he hooked them up with an unknown guitar player at the time, the awesome, and to me, the guitar player of Dio, Vivian Campbell, the guitar hero. Viv is the man, his riffs, his solos, everything. To me, he just works perfectly, and I love Dio. I love all the stuff, but the stuff without him, to me, it's just not as good. To me, he's the most important factor other than Ronnie himself. And because Jimmy hooked them up with Viv Campbell to begin with, he just decided, well, I'm just going to join the band too as the bassist and keyboardist. And they were going to get a keyboard player named Claude Schnell, who would join in a little bit, and he would do the tour for the album. But Jimmy kind of declared that he wanted to do bass and keyboards in the album, so whatever. To me, they make an amazing writing group, and when you remove just one of them, it just does not sound the same. Kind of like early Black Sabbath and all those really important bands. I love it all, but there's just something missing. There's something super organic about this classic lineup. They actually originally wanted to have it to be kind of a different name. It was to be a band experience, not a solo career. And Dio to the grave did say that the Dio band was a band, even though sometimes there were actions that kind of say otherwise. It was to him the Dio band, as well as to a lot of these members. Dio was just the name. He got some name recognition from being in Black Sabbath, and Dio is a great name, so I would understand going with that name. Now, Dio also brought in his wife at the time, Wendy Dio, to become the manager. The songs that the band were working on at the time were really different for traditional metal because they were mixing in elements that were lost and to not be heard again from Rainbow when they were kind of going commercial in the 80s. They brought in those classical, almost power metal influences, as well as they had the heavy riffage of Black Sabbath. In these early days, even for traditional metal, these Dio albums are super unique. Now, when making the album, Ronnie actually produced the thing and would go on to produce most of their albums. So the label not only must have had a lot on the line and a lot of faith put into Ronnie, that they'd not only say, like, we're just going to make a solo album with you and put a ton of money into it, but they also just straight up allowed him to produce the whole thing. They must have had a lot of faith, and that faith did pay off. The label went in while they were making the album. They heard some songs like Rainbow in the Dark, and they knew that this album, Holy Diver, would be truly something special.
It was very magical. It was correct. It was right. It was why this band, or that band at that time, was so successful, because everyone could feel in the grooves of vinyl in those days just how wonderful it was, and just certainly how good everybody was in the band, and we really cared about each other.
This album's catchy, to the point, raw, and heavy. And it's a perfect mix that you could pretty much play this anywhere and anyone could get into it. This is the kind of album and songs that you could play in a stadium and everyone sing along. Everyone knows Holy Diver, Rainbow in the Dark, the classics from this album. And Ronnie himself actually wrote Holy Diver and Don't Talk to Strangers, two of the best songs on the album by himself. But the collaborative process to me is what makes these albums so important. The album cover is infamous. It has Ronnie Dio's mascot, Murray, whatever you want to say, and he's only on 3 albums, The Last in Line and Dream Evil coming up. And the whole idea of the cover was that Ronnie wanted to give sort of an illusion that people would instantly think, wow, this monster is killing a priest and drowning him. But you could also assert that what if the priest is actually trying to drag the monster out in the ocean and drown him? That being said, though, the logo is super interesting because not only does it look really cool, but a lot of people try to say that if you turn it upside down, it says evil, devil, or die, or whatever. I still don't see it, and even Ronnie was like, that's absurd. So yeah, that to me is just a complete dumb conspiracy. Now, I pretty much have to track by track the whole thing because how damn good it is. Stand Up and Shout. What a way to not only open the album, but to open your whole career. A killer, ripping, heavy, fast opening track that shows what makes this band so awesome and shows them all firing off on all cylinders. The classic Holy Diver, the title track, which is almost like a condensed Heaven and Hell type of feel to it, slow and heavy. And the music video for it, I must say, is classic, but god damn, that thing looks terrible. Then you got Gypsy, which to me is like a groovy, funky kind of song. To me, it's like Lady Evil from Black Sabbath, but way better. You got Caught in the Middle, an amazingly beautiful, inspiring song. It's one of the happiest songs ever. This riff was actually from Vivian's old band Sweet Savage from a song called Straight Through the Heart, which is funny because there's another song on the album called Straight Through the Heart, but it's not the same song at all, so that's pretty funny. But then you have the best song on the album, the one written by Ronnie, easily the best, maybe even the best Dio song ever. Beautiful melodic intro, but it's got like a foreboding atmosphere. The whole point of the song is to be careful. Don't talk to strangers. Don't be tricked by the things that seem good in life that are really there to just stab you in the back. And that riff, when it comes in, it just rips your head off. This album is also known for its heavy, slow songs, like obviously Holy Diver, Straight Through the Heart, which is classic. Invisible, which has a weird, like, terrible melodic intro. It's just like, oh, what the hell? But when it gets into it, man, is that a crushing song with riffs that they played forward and backwards. And then you got Shame on the Night, which is a real cool, groovy song at the end of the album. Kind of has some doomy elements, some Black Sabbath in there. But obviously the centerpiece of the album is, of course, the classic Rainbow in the Dark.
Rainbow in the Dark was not my favorite song. I felt it was too poppy. After all, I've just come from Black Sabbath, and you can't get any heavier than that. So I was about to put a razor blade to the tape and destroy it, and they talked me out of it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
The music video is once again pretty bad, but this one to me is more enjoyable because it has like a weird, almost like Monty Python vibe to it. Bud Light also had DIO do a commercial for them where they had kind of like a remix, redone vocals on the song. But what makes Rainbow in the Dark, and pretty much by extension every song DIO's ever written, really awesome in all of his bands, is that Ronnie didn't like to just write stories. He didn't like to just write straightforward lyrics about partying. He was very particular with the way he wrote lyrics. To him, it was about the listener getting whatever they wanted from it. The songs were very ambiguous.
I've tried to write so that many people can have different ideas about what that song is. The song Rainbow in the Dark, for example, I'll have 10 people give me 10 different attitudes of what that song is about. So I've accomplished what I've set out to do. I've made them think. And I made that song their song because I'm writing for them. I'm sometimes writing about them too, but I'm writing for them. And I usually have a tendency to write more for the downtrodden than anyone else. Not being the tallest individual on the face of the planet, I know what it's like to be looked down upon. People have suffered because of that. And I wanted them to know that, hey, look what I did. I overcame it all. It didn't matter to me. It never bothered me. I didn't care about stature. All I cared about was what was inside the package.
DIO's first album, Holy Diver, was a huge success. To this day, it's like a platinum album. They did a very successful, awesome tour. They had like a magical stage set of like a mountain and stuff. Super cool. But to me, Holy Diver will always be a perfect album. It's a 10, and it's, from a certain point of view, objectively the greatest metal album of all time. Now, I know music is subjective, but I have information from the man up there, and I'm not talking about my dad upstairs, I'm talking about the man upstairs, that this is the greatest metal album of all time. And you're probably thinking to yourself, I'm completely nuts, but hear me out. Ronnie always said, listen to your dreams, and one time I had a dream that I was visited by kind of illustrious, weird figure. You know, there was just something about him. There was something special. It was giving me life advice, which I idiotically don't remember, but it was like really inspiring, important stuff. And he just kind of put the pieces together. This is like God or something. And before he left, I said, hey, like a total idiot, what is the best metal album of all time? And he said, you really want to know? And I said, yeah. And he said, it's Holy Diver. And then he left. What? I love how I don't remember anything else about that dream but that. If you don't like it, then you're just going against, you're going to basically get smitted. You're smited. You're going to get struck by lightning for not at least liking Holy Diver. So if you're one of those idiots that's like, it's overrated, you better give it a chance or you'll see some holy wrath flung upon you.
What does the church, for instance, in the States think about you?
Well, they think that that I'm the devil, or that I'm about to be the devil's man, or that this particular sign means putting a curse on you. But they should find out what's inside of my package, you know, before they decide to throw stones at it.
And what does that sign mean with two fingers?
Oh, I just cursed you, and you're going to die in hell.
So with Last in Line, you're pretty much going to get more of the same, but not in a bad way at all. In some ways, they kind of refine the sound of Holy Diver, especially the production. Now, with the band, they brought in Claude Schnell on keyboards finally into the fold. He was touring at the time, now he's in the band for sure. Ronnie by himself wrote 2 more awesome songs on here, 2 epic anthems. My favorite song on the album and the opening track, to me, the DIO anthem to end all DIO anthems, other than Don't Talk to Strangers. We're of course talking about We Rock.
Carry on, we rock.
But it doesn't stop there. Ronnie also wrote another amazing song that was actually left off of Holy Diver, which I don't know why it wasn't even on that album, because it really should have been. It's just as good, if not better, than some of the songs on there. And that's Evil Eyes, one of the most catchy songs in the album that's chorus is going to get stuck in your head and not leave. Speaking of Evil Eyes, Ronnie gets a lot of credit for bringing this, the rock and metal horns, to metal. Ronnie, though, never really took credit for it. He did kind of popularize it, though, because he used it so much. Everyone was doing it back, and then every show, everyone's doing this from now on. So I guess you really could credit him for doing it. No one was really doing that at Kiss shows or Coven shows or even early Black Sabbath.
I'm Italian-American, and this was something I saw my grandmother use a lot when I was a little kid. She'd go, and she said it was called the Maloik. The Maloik is protection against the evil eye.
There's, of course, the title track, The Last in Line, has a beautiful intro, and then one of the best slow Dio songs of all time. An even better title track, in my opinion, than Holy Diver. To me, this song is so inspiring, so kick-ass. I mean, how can you not love The Last in Line? The music video is awesome as well, where the Keanu Reeves-looking kid falls down the elevator and is attacked by tentacles, like a post-apocalyptic kind of slave society. One Night in the City is really good too, kind of a tragic song, but to me, the song that is a standout in how heavy and how fast it is, it's damn near speed metal, is I Speed at Night. When you thought Stand Up and Shout was fast and aggressive, this song comes in and is unlike any other Dio song after. Nothing compares. And then he had another single music video from the album, Mystery, which music video is okay, but it's clearly, although a good song, trying really, really hard to be like another Rainbow in the Dark type with the keyboards and the catchiness. You know, it's always a mystery, the inspiring chorus. To me, the song has always sounded a lot like a really good song from The Who known as Bob O'Reilly. Nothing wrong with that, but you know, I'd even prefer Mystery if I'm gonna be entirely honest with you, because I'm a much bigger fan of metal and Dio. And then, of course, the ending track, the song that puts Shame on the Night to shame with its doominess, Egypt, The Chains Are On. What an amazing song. Personally, don't really like the way Ronnie says milk and honey. It sounds a little cringy, but it is a perfect way to end the album. And speaking of Egypt, the band decided to have an Egyptian stage set with pyramids and sphinx and snakes that came up on the stage, everything. Iron Maiden's stage set at the time, which oddly enough, both were doing Egypt. Iron Maiden on the Power Slave tour with the Egyptian album cover there too, and Last in Line kind of has like a desert type feel too. They were both doing the same thing coincidentally, neither was ripping each other off. They were both cool stage sets, but if I'm going to be entirely honest with you, I think not only did Dio kind of have the more cool effects with the snakes and stuff coming out, I think that Dio's live album at the time, Live at the Spectrum, is way better sounding, way better looking, and has better production and better songs on it than Iron Maiden's Live After Death. Now, I know that's heresy, but go listen to the Spectrum and tell me different. Now, at this time, there was the infamous music celebrity song known as We Are the World, where a bunch of celebrities kind of got together and tried to get a bunch of relief for some famine. And the Dio band decided to kind of organize their own thing for rock and metal musicians. Vivian Campbell and Jimmy Bain kind of orchestrated the whole thing, and the band wrote the song together, a song called We're Stars, which is awesome, super catchy and killer. But they decided to bring in a bunch of these rock and metal musicians, you know, Jeff Tate, Rob Halford, Don Dokken, I could go on and on and on. There's a ton of people that, you know, playing guitar solos like Yngwie, and they even have the Spinal Tap guys in there, and Ted Nugent, everyone's there, Blackie Lawless, everyone's doing the chorus. It's awesome, just what a ripping song. But what's funny as hell is the behind the scenes of making the song, because not only are the Spinal Tap guys hilarious, and not only is everyone like, holy crap about this Yngwie Malmsteen guy just destroying every guitar player there, but the funniest part is actually Ted Nugent, because everything that ever comes out of his mouth is absolutely hysterical.
Everybody in the world, I think, at this point in time, is like clamoring for an opportunity to become involved, to try and right any wrong that they can, and to apply their energies into you know, getting some corn to the starving folks and getting some problems solved over, especially in Ethiopia and around the world, not only in the foreign countries, but right here in the good old US of A.
A couple things I want to say before we move on about Worst Stars is that the song has a guitar solo from Vivian Campbell, as well as the next guitar player from Rough Cut at the time, Craig Goldie, which is kind of weird. One last thing I want to note is that in the chorus of this song, where they're all singing together, you hear a high note unlike any other that's soaring above all of the other singers. And I still can't tell for sure who it is, but I'm pretty sure it's Rob Halford. You take a listen and tell me what you think. Now, last in line, to me, just as good, if not even better than Holy Diver. Another perfect album. And I'd say, you know, if you're into the more metal, faster type stuff, I'd maybe even say you might like Last in Line better because there's more fast songs in this one. But let's move on to the next album.
Greetings, my children. Come with me now and discover the magic that lies beyond the sea of dreams. And if you have the courage to cross the Rainbow Bridge, you may find the Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart, somewhere bleeding in the night.
Now, Sacred Heart is one of the most interesting DIO albums. I used to hate The Thing. This album was where things fell apart a little bit, not just musically, but with the band members and with Ronnie's personal life. Him and his wife, Wendy, who was also the manager, ended up divorcing, and she stayed his manager till the end, pretty much. So I don't know how that worked out. I don't even know if they were really married when he died either, because from what I know, they were just always divorced for a long time, but then she calls herself his widow and referred to herself as his wife all the time. It was really weird. I still can't figure out what exactly went down there. But Ronnie was also fighting with Vivian Campbell in the studio, apparently. Vivian Campbell kind of denies it and says, no, he was trying, he was inspired, but he was butting heads with Ronnie. Ronnie was demanding a lot, but he was claiming that Vivian Campbell was, you know, half-assing it. I don't know who you're going to believe in that situation, but it's definitely evident that they're not clicking with each other, no matter who was causing it. Now, even though nowadays I consider this one of his better albums, and to me, you know, the original lineup and all those albums to me is just DIO at perfection, I will admit that there's a lot of problems with this album that a lot of people will kind of cite as a reason that they just straight up hate this album, and a lot of people do view this as one of DIO's worst albums. Some do think it's one of the better ones, but a lot do think this one stinks, and I get it. There's a lot of derivative aspects of it, where, you know, Ronnie's past projects were always kind of recycling some things, especially the songs and their feel over and over and over. And when you get like, what, 6, 7, even more if you're including Elf albums in of repeating some of the same types of songs, it's gonna get old, and it's especially old on this album. Even Holy Diver and Heaven and Hell sounded the same. There was like Lonely is the Word and Over in Black Sabbath. Just all these songs sounding the same. Then we get to this one, you're just repeating DIO songs ad nauseum to the point where when you clone something too many times, it's gonna come out a little retarded. Case in point, the song Hungry for Heaven, which was written for a movie called Vision Quest, but ended up on the album, which is trying so hard to be Mystery again, which is trying to be Rainbow in the Dark, and ends up sounding like Baba O'Reilly again. And then you have like The Beat of a Heart on the album, which is trying so hard to be just like Straight Through the Heart off Holy Diver. Oddly enough though, I kind of prefer like The Beat of a Heart. I don't know what it is, but I do prefer it.
The beat of a heart. Like the beat of a heart. Straight through the heart. Straight through the heart.
The band desperately needed to do some different songs, and you're not going to really get anything super different from, you know, the singles on the album, the music videos. And you're not going to get anything different for sure from the filler on the album. That being said though, the one exception to that is Rock and Roll Children, a song that DIO absolutely loved. It was always one of his favorite songs. It's a very good song. It's something different. The music video is kind of cool, although Ronnie looks really suspiciously ugly in it. I don't know what was going on there, but it's a really unique, cool song, one of the best off the album easily. A lot of it's also just straight up filler, and filler that a lot of people can't get into. In my opinion, I think it's killer filler. But there's also huge, awesome songs in here that a lot of people ignore and forget how awesome these are and stand out best Dio songs. We're talking about the title track, Sacred Heart, one of his most awesome, epic songs, probably his best title track ever, and a song that just kicked even more ass live when they played it, made it super long and killed the dragon. And my favorite song here maybe is Sacred Heart or the opening track on here, King of Rock and Roll. Although it's not exactly reinventing the wheel, I do love me some fast opening songs like We Rock and Stand Up and Shout. And to me, King of Rock and Roll kicks ass. The song isn't about Dio being the king of rock and roll. It's about you being the king of rock and roll.
He's got control. He's the king of rock and roll.
The one thing that's really weird about it though, although it completely kicks ass, for some reason there's like live sounds played in the background of cheering from the audience, the whole thing, even though it's not live. But I gotta say one last thing is that the music video on here, and even the music video in Hungry for Heaven, are awesome. And this era of metal was the best. You know, sure, a lot of these hard rock and hair bands from the 80s had cool lighted stage sets, but were so over the top that it kind of inspired grunge to just be so simplistic and barely any lighting, and that's kind of the norm nowadays. I think we should go back to at least what the traditional dinosaurs, the traditional metal dinosaurs were doing with their crazy stage sets.
Every night in every town, we're going to construct a medieval castle with turrets, stone staircases, the works. We've even got a working drawbridge, as well as a second bridge that connects our drummer, Vinny, to reality. The focal point of the stage is this little guy, our 2-story tall dragon. He's pretty ferocious when he gets going. He breathes fire, smoke comes from his nose, and he can stretch his wings about 35 feet.
To me, this album used to be Dio's like worst album ever. I don't know what switched in me, but now I can't get enough of it. It is one of my favorites easily, despite terrible production, which sounds like it's a live recording or even worse than a live recording. Hell, the Dio live albums at the time sound better than this. Cheesy songs like Shoot Shoot, which are just stupid, and then filler out the ass. No matter what, I love the whole thing, start to finish. Kill me. That being said though, to me, there's no way that I'd ever call this the best album. People that call this the best one are the kind of people that call Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom, the best Indiana Jones movie, and that's what we call hipsters, ladies and gentlemen. And then of course there was the infamous tour, their biggest tour ever for Sacred Heart, which had multiple legs of it and was like their highest selling tour of all time. And during the second leg, they even sold out Madison Square Garden. This band was huge at the time. And they even had a really cool live video, which was released on VHS, but now has been re-released on Blu-ray, which you guys should get. For sure, one of the greatest Blu-ray live shows of all time, Finding the Sacred Heart. But then halfway through the tour, things fell apart again, where Viv was either fired or quit. It kind of depends on who you ask. And Ronnie would always claim that Vivian Campbell, you know, they left on good terms, but then would kind of say that, you know, no, he left the band for sure. But Vivian Campbell, especially nowadays, tells a different story of what happened.
Ronnie did make us a promise when it started that, you know, and we did work for next to nothing. I mean, you know, we didn't get any of the record sales or any of the merch or the ticket sales or anything. And, you know, the band was very successful. And so the deal was, Ronnie said, you know, I can't afford to pay you a lot. He says, I want to present it as a band. It's obviously called, the band's called Dio because of the name recognition. But, you know, we wrote as a band, we presented as a band. And there was a real chemistry there, a real magic, you know, that's pretty evident on those first records. But the promise was made to us that by the third album, it would be more of an equitable situation. And I was a squeaky wheel. I mean, the third album came and I was the one going, excuse me. Yeah. And at this time, to be honest, Ronnie was in a real dark spot. It was when he and Wendy had split. By the time we were doing the Sacred Heart album, nobody wanted to be in the studio anymore. You know, Ronnie's mood was really dark. At the same time, I was kind of pushing for this promise to be fulfilled, you know? I didn't want to just let it slide. So anyway, I did the first American leg of the tour. I came back over this side of the pond to visit my family because we were due to start here in the UK.
Yeah.
And that's when I got a FedEx that told me I was fired if I didn't sign a contract.
You know, Wendy never really saw it as a band, you know, Wendy DIO. That's something that really, really upset me with Ronnie, you know, after I was fired, was that I think Ronnie knew better. You know, he understood the real magic that the original band had and the chemistry we had. So that was particularly sad that he was willing to capitulate to Wendy. I think he was really fearful of her, you know, and he never stood up to her.
Now, for the longest time, no one believed or backed up Vivian Campbell at all. Everyone just thought, oh, he's such an asshole. Until Vinny Appice and even Claude Schnell and all these other members of the band at the time, in recent times after Ronnie had passed, actually did come out in interviews and say, no, we were being screwed over financially, and he was completely in the right to come out. We did not want him gone from the band, and he was not being hard to work with.
We were doing tours in arenas. You know, back then, one of the tours grossed $8 million. That was in those dollars. That's probably $80 million. I don't know. We all felt the same way, that we're getting a little bit
less.
We're not getting what we were promised, and we should be doing better than we're doing. You know, somebody's making a lot of money here, and it wasn't us. Finally, Ronnie said to me, I'm going to fire Viv. I'm like, what?
And then later on, Viv and Dio would just constantly slag each other in the press. Vivian would be like, I'm embarrassed of my work in Dio. But then Ronnie would, you know, say some terrible things about him in video.
Ronnie, I saw Vivian Campbell about a year ago. He said he was.
Oh, you poor son of a bitch. Yeah, really? I hope he fucking dies.
And that's just kind of the way Dio was, man. He was really great overall, an inspiring person, amazing to his fans, would sign everything. But then when it came to working with him, it sounded like he was hard to work with, in the sense he was very, very much a perfectionist, as well as butted heads financially with people. But what makes it hilarious is that he would always act like, you know, oh, no, we left on good terms. You know, I have no problems. I have no beef with them. But then proceed to say stuff like, well, I just hope they fucking die, though. He was a very, very open person, and when he felt emotionally about something, even in the open and in interviews, it came out. That being said, though, as much as I love Ronnie, they should have paid Vivian and the other guys what they were promised. There's no excuse. Wendy is responsible for breaking up this classic lineup, and I'll never forgive her for it. Despite this, the band was doing super well at the time, selling out Madison Square Garden. The first two albums went platinum. This one sold super well. But if you look at the sales of it over time, this one has not performed nearly as well as the two albums before it. And from this point on, the album sales would just completely tank. And he probably just naturally lost a bunch of fans. There's still a lot of people to this day that only like the first two and say Sacred Heart stinks. I think you should go back and give it another chance, but I completely get it. Now for the second leg of the tour, they'd bring in rough cut guitar player Craig Goldie, and they did a live album with Vivian before on the first leg of the tour, known as Intermission, which is a really cool live album. Way too short though. But one of the songs in there is actually a studio recording of a song called Time to Burn, where they actually have Craig playing guitar. And they also did a song for the Iron Eagle soundtrack, Hide in the Rainbow, which is a really good song as well. But I just want to quickly say about Craig Goldie that he's a good guitar player. I really like his stuff. I really like the stuff he plays on, especially the next album, Dream Evil. I think he absolutely kicks ass on it, and his songwriting's good. That being said, even the lineup realized that Vivian was the man, and just kind of break all that up for no reason would just leave, to even this day, even in my mouth, a sour taste. Craig Goldie was just destined to not be accepted fully by the fans or this lineup.
I think sometimes you also get to a point where you're constantly trying to outdo your own formula, and that becomes very difficult. This album was a return to form because we wanted it to be that way. Holy Diver was an album, the first of our albums, was an album that had nothing to prove. We didn't have anyone to please, only music to make from our hearts and from our minds. And this one, I wanted to be the same way. So we went back and tried to be a bit more diverse again, to make every song different.
So with Dream Evil, let's get the bad out of the way first. Now obviously Ronnie does an amazing job singing, I mean he always does, but something about the way he produced his voice sounds so irritating. It like hurts your ears. It feels like someone's shoving shards of glass and just rubbing them around in there. I do not like that. And obviously, I'm not a fan that Vivian Campbell's not on the album. He should have been. Craig Goldie does a good job though, but he kind of has a lot of Blackmore-ish qualities to him as well. And then you have the title track, which just sounds like Man on the Silver Mountain. But that's the only instance on the entire album of them repeating themselves, because otherwise, in my opinion, they were completely successful, at least musically, not financially of course, but musically successful of stripping away the complete repetition of old, with the exception of Dream Evil, but still keeping that same type of direction. So let's talk about the good things about the album, which is pretty much everything. This album is on average like the fastest DIO album, with like all these up-tempo, crazy, cool songs that a lot of times sound like speed metal, and is bumping it up even further than The Last in Line, even more metal than that in some aspects. To me, the best example of that is the opening track of my favorite song on the album, a song that opens with an irritating alarm clock, one of the best DIO riffs ever, Night People.
Night People.
Now, although the band liked to play around with power metal without being really fully power metal, this album I'd say is the closest to being it, whether it is or not, because the keyboards are extremely prevalent. Claude Schnell is all over every song, way more in the mix, and he even plays a really killer keyboard solo on one of the best songs of the album, the epic song All the Fools Sailed Away. And then of course there's I Could Have Been a Dreamer music video, and that song proved that they could write a very classic DIO sounding song and have it be a hit without it sounding like anything before or after. With this album, they do a lot of cool different stuff which fits perfectly, like Overlove, where they have fast bluesy playing. Then you have All the Fools Sailed Away, which is very different. There's even like child choirs on it, very orchestral, different for DIO. But then you have the ending song on this album, which is the weirdest one easily, but I absolutely love it. The ending track, When a Woman Cries, the keyboard parts in it are super weird. The riff itself is weird.
It's stronger than a smile. Let it go. When a woman cries.
And despite a lot of people giving this album some grief and just being like, I only listen to stuff with Vivian Campbell, to me, this is absolute classic DIO. This is the last one of that classic era, and you are robbing yourself of amazing music if you don't give at least one chance to Dream Evil. Now, Craig never fully kind of clicked with this lineup of the band. He was under a ton of pressure from Ronnie and kind of didn't deliver to what the band or Ronnie wanted. When you have Vivian, a guitar god, leaving the band that they clicked with so well on a personal level and then just kind of left in a BS way, they were just never going to get along with Craig Goldie.
The rest of the guys in the band weren't convinced that Craig Goldie was the right player for this band. And perhaps at the end of the day, he wasn't. I still will always give Craig the respect that he's due. He's a hell of a player. He's a hell of a musician. He deserved better than that from the people who played in this band. So I won't be part of that. They just didn't happen to like him. I do, and I think he's a great player, so what the hell do they know?
But then they brought in Rowan Robertson, an 18-year-old guitar player that absolutely ripped it on the demo tapes he had sent. The band had actually tried out another guitar player before Rowan, and everyone in the band except Ronnie absolutely loved him. They're like, this is going to be even better than Vivian. We love him on a personal level, everything. And then Ronnie was just like, he's not the guy. And I think it must have something to do with the fact that Ronnie is just addicted to having British guitar players. And rightfully so, all the band members were super disillusioned with Ronnie at this point because they're just like, well, shit, he's being a dictator. He brings in Rowan Robertson, this 18-year-old kid. They're all a lot older. They're obviously not going to click with him on a personal level or a musical level, and they just didn't click, and DIO didn't listen to them. He said, no, this is the guitar player. So Jimmy Bain was fired, and then Vinny Appice and Claude Schnell just felt like the lineup was just falling apart and just wasn't the same anymore. And the writing sessions were just boring the hell out of everyone involved. Apparently, not only did Rowan deliver on the lead guitar front, but he just wasn't delivering with the writing the songs. You know, there was a lot of pressure on him, just like Craig Goldie, and he apparently dropped the ball to a lot of the members' eyes. So they just felt like this writing session was a total disaster and they all bailed. And the funny thing though is a lot of these songs, if not all of them, were done with this lineup because there's a ton of co-writes from Jimmy Bain and Vinny Appice, as well as, Rowan and Ronnie pretty much writing everything on the album together. But you have Teddy Cook on bass, which is kind of an unknown, Jens Johansson, the keyboardist of Yngwie Malmsteen, and then you have an interesting addition which would join on later albums even, become pretty much the modern drummer for Dio, Simon Wright, who I like, but he's kind of a simple person, not like mentally simple, but like a simple drummer. But this lineup would end up going to the studio and making a very different album for the Dio band.
There were new ideas coming from places that we've used. There were too many cobwebs before. Once you get stuck into doing it one way, you continue to do it for years and years and years.
The direction is almost entirely different. It's little bits of old traditional metal Dio, little bits of power metal, but barely any. But most prevalently mixed in here is elements of blues metal, most notably on Twisted, Between Two Hearts, which is like a bluesy version of Don't Talk to Strangers, and the just straight up blues song, without question, Evil on Queen Street. But even the songs in here that try to be traditional metal don't really sound as Dio-y as before. They sound much more aggressive and more street level, like Walk on Water, which is a great, heavy, fast song, as well as one of the best songs in here, the opening track, Wild One, which has a cool music video of them rocking out and some skateboarding stuff. And to me, songs like this is where Rowan truly shined. And I think this should have been more the direction for the album instead of more the bluesy direction. But you get what you get and you don't mind a bit, and Wild One's a damn good song. As much as I like this album, a lot of songs on here really do feel slightly half-baked. Even the single, Hey Angel's a good song, but there's so many other songs in here that stand out a lot more. And to me, the second half of the album is where things really get moving, because there's a couple songs in a row where it's just kind of grinding to a halt, but once you get to the title track, to me the best on the album, is where things get better, where even the slow bluesy elements are perfect here. Doom elements as well. To me, the song Lock the Wolves is one of Dio's greatest songs of all time, with an amazing riff. The album literally is and feels a little too long. There should have been some songs cut from it. You go from 9 to 11 songs and it just feels too much. A lot of the songs are a little too long, too drawn out, too slow. And I'd like to change the direction, but I'm never really itching to re-listen to this album too much. And I just don't feel like this lineup or Rowan really clicked. And the problems with the lineup and the writing are just very evident here. A very interesting thing happened while on tour for this album.
We were contacted actually by Geezer, and we were playing in Minneapolis at the time, and Geezer's wife called, who has managed his career for a while, and said, we'd like to come to the show. And we said one thing, sure, but bring your bass because you're going to play that night. He went, okay. So he didn't bring a bass, but we had one for him there. And that night, we got loaded, me and Geez, in the bar. He said, Tony really would like to get back together.
We'd gone through a time in Dio where the people I was playing with I wasn't really happy with. It's not them individually, but as a group, I think I'd been at it too long with a band that had been too good for too long, and now I had to chop and change and put another one together. And I think I got weary of it, I really did. And now suddenly in place was going to be the Sabbath that I knew before, with a guitar player that I loved and a bass player that was brilliant and a drummer who was amazing and a band that wrote well together, and we can do this again. And so we did.
So the Mob Rules lineup of Black Sabbath ended up reuniting, but there was a ton of problems making the album Dehumanizer, which ended up being a very dark, pissed off album.
Like anything else with Sabbath, we didn't have a problem, we created our own. And so we created a lot. This album took about 1.5 years to do, from beginning to end. An album shouldn't take that long, it just shouldn't do. But, everything got real political.
But then it all went up in flames when Black Sabbath was asked to open for Ozzy Osbourne's solo band at the end of his No More Tours tour.
We were offered to be the opening act for Ozzy on his last, what were supposed to be his farewell shows. He was never going to tour again. He was never going to play again. Gee, what happened? It stopped, didn't it? I didn't want any part of that. I did not want to be part of the circus that was going to happen that night. And that circus was for them to not only be the act that went on before Ozzy, and then after Ozzy, for them to get together again with Bill Ward and Tony and Geezer and Ozzy, which is what they did. And then they announced that they were going to have a reunion. Well, that would have meant that it wouldn't be any band with me in it anyway, or Vinny, so I guess I did the right thing. And then not too long after that, Ozzy decided, no, I don't want to do this. So let's face it, it all comes down to the fact that someone wanted to break this band up, and they did a very good job of it.
Not only were the Black Sabbath camp pissed at Ronnie for doing that and leaving, Ronnie was beyond pissed.
No one wanted to talk about it. There was no communication. Again, no matter what anyone tells you, no matter what lies Tony Iommi or Geezer Butler have made up for themselves now, we never talked about this. We were on a bus just like this. They stayed in the back, and I stayed in the front. Sorry, I didn't want to do that, but that's the way they chose to do it. So, you know, next time, if you get a chance to talk to them, don't let them bullshit you. Don't let them say, no, I don't want to talk about it. Ask them the real questions. Did you really talk about that? Well, the answer is no. And then play them that next time. So I can talk to you guys. You never talked about it, did you? And you blew the best band there ever could have been on the face of the earth, you stupid assholes.
He made an album that truly, completely speaks to just pure anger and hatred and everything. It is one of the most nihilistic albums I've ever heard. Even for, like, you know, the reach for the stars, you know, wish for rainbows, man. He basically just said it's never gonna happen and talked about everything that makes this world terrible, you know. Corruption, greed, control, mind control, government problems, we're all being abused, everything. He talks about all of it. And just leaving from Black Sabbath, he pretty much made an album that was even more darker and more pissed off than Dehumanizer, the last album he did with Sabbath. And this ends up pretty much being like the Empire Strikes Back to Dehumanizer. This is the same thing, but way more of it. We have just straight up doom metal Dio. And most of the albums going from this point on, even when they bring in kind of more of the traditional Dio elements, are straight up doom metal albums. So for this lineup, Ronnie and Vinny brought back in Jimmy Bain, but then ended up firing him, and then brought in Jeff Pilson, the bass player from Dokken, who would also end up writing a lot of the material in here and doing a really awesome job. He really fit with this lineup. But for the guitar player, Vinny hooked up Ronnie with a really interesting guy that was in a band with Jimmy and Vinny, known as World War III. Guitar player Tracy G gave a whole new life to the Dio band with weird sound effects. He was kind of like an industrial guitar player. We did like weird dive bomb sound effects, but also had really good bluesy solos, awesome tone. And he pretty much made the band heavier. He wrote a lot of the songs, and he gave even the old songs they played a super heavy edge. A lot of people just bitch about Tracy G, which I don't get. Sure, his sound effects are a little weird, and a lot of people just don't want to hear dark Dio, but I guess it's the only band where getting heavier is getting worse to some of the fans, so what the hell ever. This is one of Dio's best albums just for the songs alone, the direction, the lyrics, all of it. The production's great, everything is perfect. It opens with a really weird song called Jesus Marrying the Holy Ghost, and it has some slight industrial elements kind of thrown in there. Kind of more up-tempo song, which is odd for the album because most of it's slow and drudging, even more than Lock Up the Wolves, but works a hell of a lot better here. That being said though, I kind of think it shouldn't have opened the album. I think the best way it could have opened was with one of the best songs in here, the super doomy Pain, because you open with them going crazy. Dio says, given the choice between pleasure and pain, I choose pain. Right then and there, it gets super heavy and doomy, and that to me would have been the ultimate way to open this album. And one of my favorite Dio sayings of all time is in the song Pain, where he says, "Bury my bones on the moon." What an awesome lyric. Dio just never disappointed. Then you have Strange Highways, the title track, one of the best songs in here, one of his best songs ever. Really melodic and heavy at the same time, amazing singing. Then you have Hollywood Black, which is rightfully calling out kind of the Hollywood and music industry scenes of, you know, selling yourself out and ending up on the street, basically just entertainment whores. And apparently this song was supposed to be a Black Sabbath song on Dehumanizer. One Foot in the Grave is such an angry, pissed off song, one of my favorites on here. I'm pretty much track by tracking it. I mean, can you blame me? It's Strange Highways, one of the best metal albums, especially doom metal. And then you have a really interesting, super evil and doomy song here, probably the darkest one of them all, Evolution, which mixes in elements of Tracy G's kind of industrial side with the heavy doom sprinkled in there. And it really is an ultimate marriage on this song. And then one of the darkest songs in here kind of starts out like it's gonna trick you. It's kind of melodic, almost like a ballad, where everything else on here is heavy beyond belief. This song comes in, you just know something's off. It's not gonna be a typical ballad. With a song called Give Her the Gun, you know something's up. Comes in doomy and heavy. And from what I get from the song, it's kind of like a molestation type song where the girl just gets the gun and shoots her dad, you know, or whoever's molesting her. But then one of my favorite songs in here is Here's to You, which is one of the only fast moments in the entire album. The only thing on here that kind of sounds like it'd be anything off the last couple albums, but even then it sounds more like it'd be off Lock Up the Wolves. Very fast and up-tempo, and an awesome song that was, you know, directed toward us.
To you.
A lot of people still just refuse to give this album a chance, even though it's maybe my favorite one of them all. They just refuse to ever acknowledge the idea of Dio being dark and nihilistic or anything. But you know what? Sometimes it's more important and impactful for someone to not give you delusions of like living in a fantasy land, and your dreams will come true. And sometimes it's more important and better for someone to just say they know your pain and then to spell it out for you, everything that's happening to you and understanding it. And to me, that's what makes Strange Highways a more effective and, to me, a more inspirational album than even albums like Holy Diver, and to me, the realest album that he has ever made.
Of course, I've always been known as Mr. Magic Wizard, which is dragons, demons, and all that kind of thing. But, you know, the world we live in is just, I don't think it's prepared for that kind of escapism anymore. This is a real brutal place that we all live in now, with especially for, you know, the people we make music for. A lot of younger people are facing, you know, no chance of employment. Who cares about education? What's it going to get you? We have rocket scientists on the street now, you know, begging for nickels. We've got, you know, the threat of war always, what we've done to the ecology, disease, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I'm painting a black picture, but it is a black place that we live in. So I couldn't in all good conscience tell people that dream and dream hard and your dreams will come true. Sure, that's still, you know, a probability, but I really needed to write about the world that I see.
So Angry Machines is like the sequel to the sequel of the last album. So we have Angry Machines rekindling that same angry fire that was there in Strange Highways, but not as fresh. I mean, he just got off of having problems with Sabbath and Strange Highways, so it's somewhat diminished, but to me, still a great album. Now, the lineup was starting to get a little janky at this point. Jeff Pilson did record the album, but would end up leaving, and they brought in a keyboard player to do some stuff here and there on the album, Scott Warren. And speaking of keyboard stuff, one of the most interesting songs on here is an epic song on the album known as Stay Out of My Mind. And a lot of people don't know this, but Dio had a lot of weird influences, especially at this time. He was a big fan of like Napalm Death and Tool, and it really comes out on this song, the Tool influences. It's progressive and weird. It's a very dark song, and Scott Warren's keyboard stuff really comes out in the middle of the song, where they have weird orchestration and noises. And an interesting part of this song is that the lyrics kind of reference Jesus in the desert being tempted by Satan. You know, all that's down there could be yours for the taking. And to me, that's what the song's about, you know, being tempted by evil and trying so hard to get it out of your head. Maybe even like problems with schizophrenia. Stay out of my mind. To me, the best song on here, though, is the doomy as hell, and song with a really cool, creepy bass intro, Hunter of the Heart. Dio sings really dark on it. I love every moment of the riff kills. But apparently there was supposed to be a music video for it that was like recorded and everything. And you think with all the time that like Wendy Dio wastes on stupid holograms that she could, you know, get the funds to get that music video and get it edited and released. We want to see the Hunter of the Heart music video, damn it.
Hunter of the Heart.
Don't Tell the Kids is awesome, very fast song. Institutional Man starts it all real doomy, great song as well. They end it with just a straight up beautiful kind of piano and singing song, one of the most beautiful vocal performances from Ronnie of all time. A song called This Is Your Life, and to me, the best song on the album, maybe even more than Hunter of the Heart. Everything kind of sucks at the time, and to this day everything kind of sucks, but you know, at the end of the day, we should have some hopeful aspirations, and this is our life, we got to do something with it. And every time I hear this song, I think of, you know, the fact that Ronnie's not with us anymore. Truly a beautiful song that if you don't shed a tear when listening to it, you're doing it wrong.
Because we're whispers in the wind.
A lot of people still say that this is the worst Dio album. I don't agree with it. To me, it is a hell of a grower. It's really, really good, but you gotta get into Strange Highways first to kind of get this one. But I will agree that it's not exactly one of his best albums, and it's definitely not as good as Strange Highways. For sure, give it a chance. But, you know, people are how they are, and the album sales were even worse than Strange Highways. It was kind of a disaster. The label and fans were just demanding that Dio do something old school, go old school, go old school. So Ronnie was like, okay, so he invited Craig Goldie, you know, the guitar player from Dream Evil, back into the fold, and he was kind of sort of trying to replace Tracy G and get Craig Goldie back in the mold by inviting them both in as two guitar players, but Tracy G just was just like, you know, that's kind of BS. I want to be the one guitar player in the band. So he ended up kind of leaving, but still on good terms. And then they brought in Simon Wright on drums to replace Vinny Appice. And then Ronnie brought in Jimmy Bain to play bass again.
The album's called Magica, concept album, first one I've ever done. It's not like Tommy, it's not like any of those kind of concepts. And what it is more like going back to what Dio used to be. People kept telling me, you know, we don't hear any Holy Diver things or things like that anymore. Could you, you know, please do that again? Well, I listen.
So Magica gets back to the kind of magical, mystical lyrics that Dio's known for, but this time around it came with something even more interesting. They decided to pursue an entire concept piece and make it a whole concept album that was supposed to be kind of part of a 3-part trilogy with 2 more albums to come out that never happened, unfortunately. I'll let Ronnie explain the story here.
Magic is a book of magic spells, so it's evil versus good like all things are, but the central character is a guy named Shadowcast, and he's like the evilest of the evil, and his job is to capture the book of Magica, destroy it. He eventually captures the high priest and the book, destroys the book, sends all the spirits on this planet, which is called Blessing, down to what is his hell, and it's called Otherworld, and takes all their spirits and puts them all into one great big collective pot of energy. But before he can do that, there's a spell that's been said that restores everything back to the way it was again. And at the end of it, you think that the evil guy Shadowcast has been killed, but he's not been killed at all. He lives another day because evil never goes away. It's always going to be there.
And speaking of Dio and his story, there's actually a track at the very end where Ronnie actually kind of just explains the whole thing straight up, which is interesting. So if you're really dying to know more about the goings-ons of the story beyond just listening to the songs, there you go. You have Ronnie reading the story forever. To this day, people still tout it as a Dio comeback of the classic Dio of old, you know. But musically, it really isn't that way. Sure, it is lyrically, but musically, it's pretty much a mixing of the last couple albums, the Doom Dio sound, and pretty much overall is a Doom album, I'd say. But also sprinkling in some like rainbow stuff in there. So there's some Richie Blackmore sounding guitar moments. It basically just sounds like if Dio did Doom with Richie Blackmore on guitar. This album's classic Dio, my ass. It's pretty much a Doom one. especially with the the opening track where it just starts out Doom, Lord of the Last Day, and one of the best songs on here, Feed My Head. But even though I really like this album and I like every song, this to me is my least favorite Dio album. Not only is it really drawn out, super long, and kind of mid-tempo and boring in spots, a lot of it just doesn't really click with me. Even my favorite songs on here just don't really stand toe-to-toe with any of Dio's other best songs, even on any other album. That being said, if I had to pick a favorite, it'd probably be Fever Dreams, which sounds like Craig Goldie couldn't be trying any harder to be Richie Blackmore. One other funny thing though is there's a really good song on here that doesn't really sound doomy at all, but ends up sounding like Cat Scratch Fever by Ted Nugent, the song Chalice. I mean, put them back to back. It's pretty much the same riff, melody, everything. I don't know how no one caught that in the band. It's so obvious. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what I think because it ended up being a comeback album for the band. It sold a little bit better than Angry Machines, and it was more promising and considered more of a classic Dio album anyway. So at the end of the day, people loved it. But Craig Goldie ended up butting heads a little bit with Ronnie. He had some family obligations going on, and Ronnie kind of wasn't giving him any leniency. And then in came guitar god from the band Lion, Doug Aldridge. He was supposed to join for Lock Up the Wolves, but something kind of happened. It didn't work out. But he was part of a band during the 80s called Lion. They're very good. You should check them out. Super underrated. But that band did the theme song for the movie Transformers, the movie from the 80s, the cartoon movie, which is an amazing movie. Now, this is completely off track because there's no other time I'll ever be able to talk about that awesome movie or the amazing theme song. But I have to derail this episode just for a second to just say you are missing out if you're not listening to Lion. Listen how awesome the theme song for Transformers the movie is and how much Doug and the rest of the band just rips it on this. What an amazing addition to the band. And with a guitar god, the band was ready to make a true comeback of the old school Dio sound.
There had been a time, I think, when we became just a little bit confusing to our fans. Perhaps we tried to be a little bit too modern. So I realized that really wasn't working for me or for the people who wanted to hear what we had done before. So I did an album before this called Magica, which gave the people all of the fantasy that we really have been known for. Certainly my writing style has been known for. And I wanted this one to be completely the opposite of that one. So you got the other side of Dio, which was like the early albums, like Holy Diver, like Last in Line. An album driven by songs and a lot faster, a lot more, I guess, metal, you'd say, than anything else.
This album is definitely old school Dio. If you love those first 4 albums, you will love this one. Traditional metal, mixing of power metal all the way through. There's lots of co-writes from Jimmy Bain on the album, which goes to show how important he must have been to the songwriting process, that the albums he's on sound like classic Dio. And the fact that he wasn't writing stuff in the album before this or after really goes to show, because the material on those albums were not nearly as good as this. Craig Goldie actually ended up co-writing a couple songs on these because he was part of the writing sessions. But Doug Aldridge came in super late to the writing. He contributed a couple things, and the things he contributed were awesome. So it's really sad that they weren't able to work together a little bit more, have another album together, because the songs he wrote were killer. Along Comes a Spider and Scream, which is one of the best songs of the album by far.
Scream for the crazy ones. Scream at the things you've done. Scream at the rising sun.
There's a really good song on here called Rock and Roll, which is about music censorship. Him and like a bunch of artists were having their music censored or being accused of being insensitive to 9/11, but I guess that happened.
They started to censor some rock and roll music that had not even been written at that time, written way before the fact. In fact, some of it was mine and Dio and Sabbath, written well before the fact, because it was politically incorrect. Excuse me,
It had nothing to do with what you're talking about. Plus the fact that at that point I knew that we were going to be sending thousands of our young men and women to a location thousands of miles away to die.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, you can go and die, but oh, by the way, we're taking your rock and roll away from you too. Something that's so important to you, that makes you an American, that makes you remember your family, that makes you remember what you're fighting for. Wasn't this all about freedom?
And then you have the classic song Push, which had the music video, played live, everything. The music video had Tenacious D in it, because Jack Black and Ronnie James Dio are really good friends. In fact, Ronnie actually ended up in the Tenacious D movie, and they ended up at the beginning of the video. It's pretty funny, but then the rest of the video is really weird with them on like white screens that were like clearly not chroma keyed. And Ronnie just hated the music video, and I see why. The music video does kind of suck, and you get motion sickness from watching it, but it's a great song. And the last song I want to talk about on here is a song called Throwaway Children, which is supposed to be like another Hearing Aid, We're Stars type song. I don't know what happened there. Good song though, but the song was supposed to be for a charity that Ronnie was always really inspired with and a part of for kids that were sexually abused. Although we all want Doug to have stayed in this lineup and done another album with Ronnie, it just didn't work. He went to go join Whitesnake, which is funny because Vivian Campbell left Dio back in the day to go join Whitesnake. But, you know, Craig ended up coming back, Jimmy Bain left, Jeff Pilson returned for just an album, not for the tour. But Rudy Sarzo for, you know, Ozzy and Quiet Riot, he just basically tours with every band, would end up doing like the final tours with Dio. But I just gotta say about Craig Goldie, man, I like him and I don't want to bash him, but there's just some things he's done personally that I just cannot agree with, and I'll get to that in a bit. But every album he's on, like in the later Dio albums, every time he comes back, the music is just not as good. True, the stuff he's on is like cool, magical, doomy Dio, but Killing the Dragon just showed that how important Jimmy Bain and how awesome Doug Aldridge was to that unit. Killing the Dragon, amazing album, but they definitely still had really good material to give us before going out in a blaze of glory.
So Master of the Moon really, I think, is another one of those cries out to people to say, don't worry about what people think you are. You are someone. You're a person who's grown into your own skin in your own way. You can succeed. Don't worry about what people say about you. The point being that most people who want to change you say, come into the sun. Let's put the light on you so we can see you and so we can change you as well. Mm-hmm. So obviously if you're not that, you must be some kind of darker person. You must be a moon person. So we're going to call you Master of the Moon. Well, you know what? Good to be Master of the Moon, because all it says is you're your own person. You can be your own person. You don't have to let others make you what they think you should be. Mm. Master of the Moon is just that whole collective idea that be proud to be Master of the Moon.
You'll never make me be like you. I'm Master of the Moon.
I gotta say, man, the best Dio album cover of all time is easily this one. Like that awesome monster, and like he's holding the moon. There's a reason why the Dio shirt that I own is Master of the Moon. Well, this review is gonna be kind of short because although it's really good, and I think kind of a step over Magica, there's not really much to say about it. There's a lot of good material on here. There's shivers. I kind of think the second half's a little bit better, a little more up-tempo, better songs on it. There's really good songs in that half of the album, especially the really doomy, The Eyes really stands out. The robotic voice that reminds me a little bit of Feed My Head. The robot voice going, The Eyes.
Just the eyes.
And to me, this album just does the doom and traditional Dio hybrid mix a lot better than Magica did. To me, though, the best song on here is In Dreams, the last song. And even though it's kind of a filler, not talked about as much, there's just something about it. It has this epic feel to it. It's the last Dio solo song ever, unless you want to include the bonus tracks and stuff. But to me, what a hell of a way to end a discography. Easily the best song on the album.
In dreams. In your dreams.
This album is really good for sure. Definitely get it. You must listen to it. and it's for sure worthy of being the last DIO album. Absolutely. Now, DIO was planning on doing Magica 2 and 3, as I said before, after doing tons of touring. He was invited to do a compilation with Black Sabbath where they'd kind of write a couple new songs. But that ended up going so well that the Rob Rules and Dehumanizer lineup reunited again to make a whole new album. But then Ronnie started to notice like a lot of problems with himself that he wasn't really getting checked up on. And he was kind of a stubborn bastard, that Ronnie was. Everyone kept saying, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. He was having terrible, terrible stomach pain. Finally went to the doctor and was given horrible news of having stomach cancer. The doctors did the best they could. They operated on him. They tried their best to, you know, make the cancer go away and use radiation and everything, but just nothing worked, you know.
I'm lucky that I am a very, you know, hard person and strong within my beliefs, so that this hasn't really been a problem for me. I refuse to be beaten in any way, shape, or form, so I'm going to beat this too.
It's been 10 years since he's been gone. The anniversary was recently that he died, and to this day, man, it still feels like he really didn't die. Everyone still is like in shock that he's dead. But you know what? He went out in a way almost on his terms. He never sold out. He never had a bad album, in my opinion. And he never even started singing bad. You know, there's a lot of singers that to this day, they're just trying way too hard to keep going what was not meant to keep going, and that's their vocal chops. But although his voice started to age a little bit at the end, Ronnie's voice was always good, always. Even when he reunited with Black Sabbath at the very end, or Heaven and Hell at the very end, his voice was always amazing. And he went to the grave a true legend. And, you know, at the funeral, there was a lot of good friends and family there. And the hardest thing to watch, even more heartbreaking to me than, you know, the footage of him in the hospital, you know, saying he will get through this, is Glenn Hughes is my favorite singer of all time. I love Dio, he's up there too, but Glenn Hughes, who's also part of Deep Purple and stuff, was a really good friend of Ronnie, and he did the most heartbreaking, touching, and beautiful cover of the Rainbow song, Catch the Rainbow, I've ever heard in my entire life. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's sad that he's gone and all this stuff. He was part of some of our favorite bands of all time. And hopefully getting you guys in this band will have Dio touch you with inspiration as well, like he did with all of us. And hopefully I've gotten you guys into the majesty that is Dio. There were some interesting things that happened, you know. They had the This Was Your Life tribute album where a bunch of bands did covers of Dio songs. And you know, as much as I love Dio, this tribute album is fucking terrible. I know how they put their heart and souls into it or whatever, and like they just wanted Ronnie to know how much he meant to them, but these covers are just bad. Like, I love Rob Halford, but his cover of Man on the Silver Mountains is just terrible. There's a bunch of bands that their styles just do not mix. Oddly enough, Tenacious D's cover of The Last in Line on here ended up getting a Grammy, even though Dio didn't get a Grammy for the song, so whatever. To me, the tribute album from a couple of years before this, I can't remember actually when it came out, but that tribute album is amazing. Damn near every cover on it's better than the original. Yngwie's cover of Gates of Babylon's the best ever. Doro's Egypt, The Chains Are On. You are doing yourself a disservice for not listening to this. But then there was some Dio tribute bands that were happening at the time. Dio Disciples was kind of an official thing that had some old Dio members in it, like Simon Wright and Craig Goldie. You have, of course, involvement from the Monster Energy drink salesman Tim Ripper Owens. But then Vivian Campbell, who was also struggling with cancer, even to this day, pretty much made amends with Ronnie and the Dio stuff and made a band known as The Last in Line, which had Vinny Appice in it, Jimmy Bain, Claude Schnell. He pretty much got the band back together. Unfortunately, Jimmy Bain shortly after died, but that was like the pretty much reformation of classic Dio, even though Ronnie's not there. and it's sorely missed. But speaking of Ronnie not being there, we have to talk about the hologram. I know a lot of you like it, and I have no problem with it. I'm not going to sit here and say you have to hate it. That's pathetic. But I'm not the only one that feels that the hologram that the DIO disciples decided to bring up, and tour with, is a total abomination. You could say all day that the people involved, their hearts are in the right place. This is not about making money or anything like that, or Wendy would never disrespect Ronnie. But to me, what matters more than intent is the result. And I am not the only one. I mean, you go look up any videos of the hologram, it's like terrible like to dislike ratio. You'll see comments disabled on everything. A lot of people do not gel well with this hologram, including myself. To me, it's a total abomination. I don't even think Ronnie would have stood for it. Ronnie was always a person that was against trends and was always about bucking them. He was always, shitting on computers for being involved too much in human life. And now we're going to recreate a man with a computer. That to me is way too far. He was always against the whole farewell tours, but then reunion tours and stuff like that. He was always against stupid trends like that. I highly doubt Ronnie would have approved of this. And it's just gross to me. It feels like we can't allow dead people to just be dead and move on. And sure, it's a harsh reality that they're gone, but it's more pathetic to just have a dead person like Ronnie being marionetted all around the stage. That's why I just have no respect for Craig Goldie or Simon Wright. They need to leave this band immediately. I don't know why they're standing up there playing like robots and having no stage presence to, abomination moving around the stage. To me, it's wrong, and they're scumbags. And I hate to say that because their material's great, but to me, they're total scumbags for being a part of it. And anyone that is, to me, is a total scumbag that are just digging up and desecrating the grave of a dead man. And at the end of the day, the hologram just appeals to people that refuse to move on, live in the past, and it sets a terrible precedent. Ronnie was always about moving on and don't appeal to like the people that just want to stick to the past, the total boomers that refuse to listen to anything new or change or anything exciting. They have to live in the past, and that's who it's going to appeal to. I don't mean to like completely dump on you for liking it, but you have to kind of question that. If you have no problem with it, have you truly moved on from Ronnie being dead? Because all of us that have moved on, we see that up there, and it's gross to us. I didn't want to end this on a sour note, but I hope I'm not the only one that feels this way, and that feels this sets a terrible precedent. I mean, there's been so many holograms now coming out. To me, the music was what influenced us positively, connected with us on the level that it did. And that's all we really do need to go on. We don't need these cheap holograms, imitations, and ploys to our nostalgia. What we had was what Ronnie did for us. And that, to us, is the real reason why we miss him 10 years on. We don't need a hologram up there to make us feel sad and to miss DIO and to, let him know that he was there for us. And the fact that he connected with us so deeply that we're missing him 10 years later and kind of having problems accepting the fact that he's gone and to this day being completely distressed by it, that sings a hell of a lot louder than any stupid hologram could. So in the words of Ronnie, this is your here, this is your now, let it be magical.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.
No!